Hello, hello, and welcome. I'm gonna let people start rolling in here, but I'm really excited to be here today, joined by two of my favorite people, and one of whose video is off. I also have Tim here with me. That's a joke. No, but really, very seriously, excited to be here with this group of my colleagues. Topic of the day is going to be all about cost optimization, and it's really meant to be an interactive session, right? And so as all of you wonderful attendees are rolling in, get ready to throw a lot of questions at us and try to stump the experts that we have here on all of your cost optimization in AWS questions. So before we get started, a couple of pieces of housekeeping information. If you are not familiar with the GoToWebinar platform, welcome to GoToWebinar. There are many boxes and arrows and things for you to click on, but the one that's the most important is the questions and answers section. So in there, you can actually ask questions to us. You can also type those questions into chat. We'll be monitoring both of those places throughout the entire conversation, but ideally, if you'd add them in the questions place, that would be great. All right, so with that, let's do some quick introductions. So I'll start with myself, since you've been listening to me babble a little bit. My name is Jonathan LaCour. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Mission. Mission, if you don't know who we are a AWS Premier Consulting Partner and Managed Service Provider. We have a full suite of services for all AWS customers, and notably, for the topic of today's conversation, we have a pretty fantastic set of cost optimization services. And speaking of those services, we have one of the key people for delivering those services with us. That's Jason Gay. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hey everybody, I'm Jason Gay. I am a senior cloud analyst here at Mission. I've been with the company for about 6 years, and I work on our cost optimization team, helping people not spend a fortune in the cloud.
Spend a smaller fortune in the cloud. That's
smaller fortune. That's a good way to put it. Sure.
Great, and thanks Tim as well for being here. Tim, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Tim Banks. I'm Technical Account Manager here at Mission, and I do a lot of engineering operational consulting for our existing customers, those that have enterprise support or those that we consider strategically important. I come from a background of over 20 years of engineering experience for operations, database administration, DevOps, site reliability engineering, and previously I worked at AWS as a Technical Account Manager. I offer insights into cost optimization from an architectural level, from a best practices level, and sometimes just from strategic approaches.
Awesome. We got some firepower on this call.
That was just way more impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. Also, if there's any Q&A here about jujitsu, you can ask those questions as well. Tim can chime in on that front. Obviously, that'll be a webinar for another day, but so perfect. I think in order to really frame the conversation, there's two things I want to do. First, I want to quickly talk about sort of our philosophy collectively on cost optimization in AWS, and then I want to actually have Jason give a demo of one of the platforms that we use to kind of drive those cost optimization services that we have. So I'm going to start with just kind of the overarching question around, like, how do we define cost optimization? And for me, I think the key thing that I want to drive home is that cost optimization is not a one-time activity. It is not a thing that you go in and you do and you say, well, good, now we're cost optimized. We never have to worry about this again. I'm not sure if you're aware, but as it turns out, AWS is a self-service platform. They're launching new stuff all the time, and I'm pretty sure your team of developers and engineers love trying it all out. And so that means that as you're developing new things and you're launching new services and workloads, you have to be vigilant. You have to be constantly looking at how you can save. So cost optimization requires a combination of people, processes, and tools that all come together in a magical dance to make sure you're not overspending, right? So that's my philosophy. And I'd love to hear Tim and Jason if you have anything to add to that before we do a demo of CloudHealth.
Go ahead. My internet cut out for about 2 seconds in the middle of that, so I missed part of what you said.
You went full pixelated.
It was very interesting. It's probably a very accurate depiction.
Did I have a good face on, or was it kind of like one of those creepy, weird, like?
Jason, do you ever have a good face on?
Oh,
that's true.
I was waiting for that. There was a glitch in the matrix.
Honestly, I think you look at cost optimization just the same way as you look at security or resilience or high availability, and you do that from the ground up, right? Cost optimization is done on the whiteboard before you ever lay a hand on the keyboard, for sure. You know, because if you don't, you just throw money at problems every time you take a shortcut. So if you're going to take an architectural shortcut, that's fine. It's just going to cost you. You know, if you want to say, hey, we don't necessarily want to work on splitting these things out to microservices. We don't necessarily want to have these things be able to be individually scalable. Well, that's fine. But then what you do at each time you do that is you lose some segment or some opportunity to cost optimize those things. If if it's a managed service, whether it's splitting things out in different tiers, whether it's making stateless workloads that you can run as spot instances. There's a lot of things that you can solve for on the whiteboard before you ever write the first line of code.
I would agree with that. I also want to point out, I think that a lot of people think that cost optimization is like this one-time exercise. And that's probably the biggest mistake some people make is it is a constant battle. You're always dealing with something. You're always looking at stuff to figure out, am I overspending in one area? Are there ways I can be, maybe things are working okay right now, but are there ways I could be doing something that's smarter or more efficient than what I'm doing the way I'm doing things right now? And that's really kind of what we're doing. So Jonathan, you talked about people, process, and tools. Our team that we have, our Cloud Foundation team, which handles all of our cost optimization, cloud optimization, uses a bunch of different tools. But we've had experts, all of which, most of which who've worked at AWS in the past. We've got processes that we go through and best practices that we try to follow and that we make recommendations upon. And we certainly like to work with our customers and ask questions and try to become a part of an extension of their team. Understanding a little bit more about what they're trying to accomplish and talking things through. Sometimes you can get that one little missing piece of information that tells you, oh, you're trying to do that? Well, you're doing this way, and you could cut your costs in half by doing it a totally different way. Think about just, maybe something isn't even on the whiteboard, right? Tim is a big proponent of putting everything on the whiteboard first, but sometimes that one random conversation that gets spawned can spawn a new idea.
Yeah, and that's why it has to be a regular conversation, right? That's what we do when our customers come to us for Cloud Foundation. They are getting a regular meeting where we are bringing them forward recommendations that are surfaced from expertise and from tools and from processes, and every topic is different every time because there's always something new to look at. So I think that is a great way for us to seed the next stage of this kind of conversation, which is going to be a quick demo that Jason's going to give of the tools that we use, specifically CloudHealth, which is an incredible platform. I've heard it described as Cost Explorer on steroids, I believe is a term that I've heard Jason call it before. I think that's totally appropriate. And before we kick into the demo, I think there are a couple more people who have joined while we were in our discussion. The whole point of this after the demo is to be conversational and to answer questions. So what I would love to start seeing is a huge queue of incredible questions from the audience building up for us to really get us set. So while Jason is going to kick into the demo, start thinking about things that you really have in your mind that we can help you with. We're here to answer your questions, not just to give you data. We have no slides, we have no information to throw at you other than the demo. We just want to be here to answer your questions. So use the Q&A feature in the webinar platform, use the chat feature. I'll be watching, and let's go ahead. And Jason, why don't you give us a quick intro to CloudHealth?
All right, and you guys see my screen all right?
Oh yeah.
Excellent. All right, so this is our CloudHealth dashboard. When you first log into this platform, you get thrown a whole bunch of information is going to get tossed in your face, and it can be overwhelming if you're not sure what you're looking at. But I'll give you a very high-level overview here. You got your current costs, you got your last month's spend, and you've got a projection for this month. And that projection for this month is based on a rolling 30 days worth of usage, right? So if you have whatever your spend is right now and looking at back 30 days, that's where your predictions are coming in. Obviously, if you launch a bunch of new resources in your account, a bunch of new instances, whatever it is you're spending money on, that is going to change that projection. That'll update tomorrow. Likewise, if you spin a whole bunch of stuff down, that's going to turn those projections down as well. Elsewhere on this main dashboard, you see a rolling 13 months worth of billing history. And you can see very easily as I'm mousing over it, this blue category here is EC2 compute. And you can see in our demo environment that every month I can mouse over each of that category and it will show me exactly what I spent in that area. You can kind of get a feel for the various different services in here too. Some people have told me, and I tend to agree with this, that this can be a little overwhelming, especially when you look at these big giant EC2 and savings plan prepays, and it makes the rest of this graph a little bit more difficult to read. So you can easily turn stuff off on the graphs, and this works throughout the entire CloudHealth platform. We can hide these upfront savings plan fees simply by clicking on them here. I'm going to hide some of these credits that are down below as well. And now you get things spread out a little bit more evenly, and you can see a pretty even spend of where things are going. And we can see that this demo environment has quite a bit of fluctuation in EC2 month over month here. All right, the next thing I'm going to show you in here is our health check. So the health check is probably one of the reports I use most frequently in CloudHealth. It's very quick glance of I need to do these things right away. So it'll show us that right now we have 71 EBS volumes that are unattached, wasting about $1,000 a month. And if we click into that, we get a report showing us those 71 EBS volumes that are sitting there driving up costs. And you can take this report and you can sort it by price. So I want to sort that right here and say, show me the most expensive ones first. Here's one costing me $1,000 a month. Maybe I should go do something about that one volume that's been sitting in my account since July 24th, not doing anything. And don't tell my CFO that it's been there. I'm just kidding. You should definitely own up to that. Anyway, we'll go back to the health check. Actually, let me show you one more thing on there. You can take these reports, and this is something that I wouldn't recommend getting a report like this on a regular basis, on a daily basis, but something like a weekly basis might be a great option for you to just have this dropped in your inbox on a weekly basis. Hey, you've got all these unattached EBS volumes. What do you want to do with them? So you can subscribe to just about anything throughout the platform. Further down inside the health check in here, you'll see things like optimization options. These are going to show you broken down by instance type, where we have opportunities to save money. So there are other ways to break stuff down. I'll show you that in a couple of minutes, but I wanted to show you here at a high level. CloudHealth is thinking we can save about $152,000 a month. Sweet. Okay, let's move on to our main dashboard here. Actually, not dashboard, sorry, our cost history report. This is the same report you saw on the main dashboard, but in the actual report itself, you get a little bit more fluctuation, or not fluctuation, it's not the right word I'm looking for, a little bit more flexibility. And in that flexibility, you get to go and carve this thing up any way you want. Right now, we're looking at things by service item, but maybe I want to look at it by account. I can break up where my spending is all by my various different accounts. And this big CHT Sandbox account is clearly our big spender. Maybe I want to break things up by region. Now it shows me everything that's, most of our resources here are in US East 1 and Northern Virginia, but I can actually look at these costs and we can drill into these things too. So if I clicked on, for example, the not in region charges, which are usually things like support, Route 53, CloudFront, basically any global service, this will bring up a list for me in tabular view that will show me the detailed billing records here. So these are the actual line items that AWS is billing us. So we can break this down and it's in order of most expensive to least expensive. That can also be dumped into a CSV for us too. Let's take a peek at EC2 instance costs. So out of the gate, this report is going to show us costs, and those costs are going to be broken down by whether or not something was on demand or no upfront RIs were applied to it, or partial upfronts or all upfronts. I'm going to slice this up a little differently. Maybe I don't care if they're covered by an RI or not in this report. I want to see it by instance family. So I'm going to type up instance type families. And just like that, it recategorizes everything for me. It'll take 1 second. It's going to make a fool of me here today, isn't it?
One of my favorite things about CloudHealth is AWS is known for lots of things, including building out incredible platforms and tools. One thing that they're not necessarily known for is making really attractive interfaces, right? The AWS console is very serviceable. It does the job, and the tools that are built into native are pretty good. But I think CloudHealth is just such an easy to use platform. Like they've really kind of leveled up the game a bit, I think, which is one of the reasons I really like.
They do, and I would say to that end, Jonathan, CloudHealth is very much form and function combined, whereas AWS is very much function over form.
Yes.
AWS is just creating opportunities for people to pretty it up a little bit, for sure.
That's right.
Exactly. Exactly. So this report right here is showing us instance types by instance type families, which is pretty cool. Now, what's neat about this, we're looking at costs here. We're looking at like our R5 daily costs, R5 instance types costing us about $16.5 a day, and we see I3s costing us $13.6 a day, and M5s in there about $5,000 a day as well. The next tab I'm going to show you is pretty much the same thing. I'm going to recategorize that by instance type families as well, except this is quantities. This is showing us instance type families by quantity. So R5s, still we have the most R5s on the books here. Then we have M5s, and then we have I3s. So there's about 1,500 I3s that are running on a daily basis. Now, if we go back to the cost report, those I3s are clearly costing us way more, given the fact that there's only there's a fraction of the amount of them as there are the R series. All right. Right sizing recommendations. So we get some really cool EC2 right sizing recommendations in here as well. It's going to look at things like CPU score, memory score, disk. It's going to tell us that we've got an instance here that's running an R4 4x large, running Linux and US East 1. Its projected cost, that is based on number of days the instance is turned on and number of hours it's turned on in a given month. And a recommendation. It's basically telling us here, hey, your CPU is really underutilized. Your memory is really underutilized, and you should get this thing out of an R5 4XL and move it to a T3 small. That's a very drastic change. And you're going to say, why? If it's only costing me $560 a month, why am I going to save $716? This is just compute cost. This is compute plus storage. So this is actually your current price. This is what you're paying plus storage. So you can save $716 a month just by making this change. Now, I tell people frequently, don't make the change just because CloudHealth tells you to make the change. Do it because you've analyzed it and you understand it and it makes sense. But it does make this quite a bit easier to go and find opportunities for you to go and carve stuff up. So this is sorted right now based on savings potential. We can sort this by instance type. We can sort it by name. We can actually factor in perspectives and look at different tagging strategies here. So if somebody had a tag of business owner or project, we can actually break down these recommendations by a specific project and actually drill into them that way, make it easy to assign those tasks out. The last thing I want to show you inside of CloudHealth here is really some of the security recommendations. Out of the box, there are two policies that come with the platform. One is a best practices for AWS security. There's another one for CIS foundations. And it gives you this really, really easy view to go find this stuff. It's basically everything you can find in Trusted Advisor, prettied up and easy to work with. The other thing too is I think there are certain checks in Trusted Advisor, Tim, you know which ones are probably off the top of your head better than I do, that are not available to you unless you have certain levels of support.
Right, the number of checks you get and the number of accounts that go across do vary by the level of support you have, enterprise support being the one that has them all.
Right, you'll get them all here. This is basically going to look at everything. So doesn't matter what type of account you have or what type of support you have, they will all show up in here. What I like to look at here is this thing right here terrifies me, looking at root users that have MFA disabled on them. Like, what are you doing? Let's just welcome somebody to come and take over our account and own me.
Come on in.
So, it gives us our account numbers. It tells us exactly which accounts we have to go and fix, and it helps us to direct that cleanup work.
We're now a Bitcoin mining company.
That's right. Congratulations. Like, well, my recommendation is just saying I'm using all the CPU. Yes, you are. You really are.
So, hey, Jason, maybe we want to dig into a little bit why then, if CloudHealth has these recommendations, then what we would need you for.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Tim.
Maybe you want to dig into a little bit as to what the difference is. I mean, CloudHealth has these recommendations. So if I have these recommendations, what would I possibly need, a cloud analyst for?
Yeah, sure. So cloud analysts are really here to share our best practices and share experiences with you. What can happen if you don't do this? How to go about fixing it. So the recommendations are here. A lot of companies that I've talked to are like, oh my God, there's all these things wrong on this list. What are we going to do to fix it? How are we going to fix it? I've got to boil the ocean and do it all right now. And what we try to do is identify on a monthly basis, if we're meeting with you typically that frequently, we try to sit down and meet with you and talk to you about it and identify 3 or 4 things to work on in this month, right? Let's not try to do it all at once, because if you try to do it all at once, you're not going to accomplish anything. If you can pick a few small items and chip away at the work, let's fix the highest priority stuff first. We just picked up a new client the other day, and I was talking to them, and we came in here and their dashboard showing that MFA was disabled on all their accounts, and they had API keys enabled on their root users on all their other accounts. And I'm like, you guys know about this? They're like, nope. Do you know what you can do with this? Nope. And educating them, they really didn't understand. They didn't know. So a lot of it's just kind of sharing experiences, telling them what could possibly happen and how to go about resolving that. We can help, or we can give you guys the guidance and give customers the guidance on how to fix it themselves too.
And to add to that, totally on point, Jason, the recommendations you get out of a tool like CloudHealth they're coming from a very tactical perspective, right? They're looking at what's going on with no context to what you're actually running or why you're running it from a business perspective. It's really just looking at the raw data and saying, it looks like this instance is underutilized. Now, the recommendation may be right size your instance, right? But the cloud analyst and the mission experts might interpret this as, well, let's look more strategically at maybe you should be containerizing these things, or maybe you should be moving to serverless workloads, or it might beg the question of a re-architecture, or other larger, broader questions that the tool is great, it's outstanding, it surfaces great information, but unless that's paired with people who know how to interpret it, who are clued into the business context, and it's interesting, this actually was the first question we had from Greg. So thank you, attendee Greg, for asking such an awesome, it's actually 2 questions. I'm gonna go ahead and list that and we can react based upon what we heard here. So he said he's a longtime product manager and solutions architect, and he has a strategic mindset, which is precisely what we're talking about here, moving from that kind of tactical to strategic. So his 2 questions are, 1, in developing a technical strategy, how do you recognize that your plan is cost optimized? So this is sort of like designing for cost optimization from the beginning, to get to Tim's point about kind of decisions on the whiteboard before you go in. And then the second question was, and actually it just disappeared on me. How do you continuously keep it that way? And when do you know you might need to do another re-architecture or another kind of strategic shift? So maybe let's react to that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think what we're talking about when you're developing your technical strategy, the first thing you want to do is you want to give yourself as many sliders as possible, right? Yes. Obviously, a monolithic architecture will have 1 slider, and it will really only up or down, and that's it. But if you are trying to give yourself as many opportunities to cost optimize as you can, you're going to have as many sliders as you can. Can we scale storage? Can we scale compute? Can we scale caching? Can we scale just this type of service, or just this service? Does this all need to be stateful? Does this all need to be on instances? Can this run on containers? What can run in Lambda? And then once you have all those things split out in the various ways, so you can have granular control on cost, then what you're going to do at that point, to the second question, once you're in operation, and you recognize suboptimal costs, that's going to give you just a chance to, at that point, say, all right, well, now because we've given ourselves these opportunities to do cost optimization on specific tiers or specific aspects of our architecture, now we can say, okay, well, these containers we're going to move to spot instances. We're going to do, all right, so our data storage tier, we need to cost optimize there, so we're going to reserve some RDS instances, or we're going to reserve some Elasticache, or we're going to get savings plans to cover some of our EC2 instances and some of our Lambdas that we've done. And you give yourself several chances too. You can combine some of them, obviously, where you say, all right, well, we're going to go to a different instance type, and we're going to reserve it. We're going to put all these on one site that we already use, and do reservations or savings plans against those. So you're whacking a lot of moles here in different ways, both between doing it on the whiteboard and then looking at it after the fact and saying, okay, well, we need to adjust this, we need to adjust this. One of the things I think also that's important to talk about when you talk about the recommendation engine is that it's a difference between information and insight, right? So CloudHealth will give you information, but people will give you insight. So CloudHealth may recommend something like, hey, it's October and you are going to recommend that you take these down from an R5 to a T3. But as we know, next month, starts Black Friday and the real Q4 buying season, hopefully. And then maybe you don't want to do the work of scaling down to T3s just to go back to scale back to R5s, because now your demand and your load has increased, tenfold. And so that's the kind of insight that a person with experience can give you that maybe you wouldn't get just from the tool. So anyone can gather information. Anyone can even aggregate information, but it's going to take experience to really look over the information and then give you the right recommendation.
Nice. I think that was a very effective response to Greg's question. That was really good, Tim. Thanks. And I totally agree, right? Like it really is, moving from data to insight and being sure that you're continuously taking that approach. And honestly, the approach you take in going in and designing a technical strategy is actually not entirely different from the same process that you use to continuously evaluate. Am I still applying the right, strategy? Is my strategy need to change, right? And so the key thing is once you're in operation is for it not to fall off the list, right? It needs to be a continuous conversation. Otherwise, the decision that you made, which was originally the right choice, you may drift off of that. It may not be the right choice anymore because circumstances change, things change. So we have a second question came in from Steve. So thank you, Steve, for this one. It's a question about CloudHealth specifically. Can it automatically fix problems that are detected and found? So Jason, I'll let you answer that one.
There are certain problems that it can fix and detect. So out of the gate, when we set it up for our customers, we don't allow it to do anything. We say read only. Don't want to play games like that. Take security carefully, cautiously, and approach it that way. There are ways to enable policies. You would have to write some IAM policies to allow some of that functionality. So for example, I had a customer come to us a couple of years back that was like, look, we've got this great orchestration tool, and we have had really slow adoption of that orchestration tool, which means we're getting resources deployed in our environment in a very non-standard manner. Things aren't being tagged appropriately. We don't know who the owners are. We can't really allocate our costs accordingly. What can we do? We had this conversation with them. We're like, all right, well, we can force them to do this. We can take away their access to the console, or we can make it a learning experience for them. And we enabled some Lambda functions inside of CloudHealth so that when it saw a resource come up and it wasn't tagged properly, terminate it. You can set it to shut down, but they were like, nope, let's go nuclear on this and let's just terminate it. Yeah. And I can tell you, they were frustrated for about 2 days, and then they never did it again. It was just like, smack my wrist, and then by that time, all right, I get it. I'll follow the rules now. So it was pretty funny to watch.
Nuanced answer there, Jason, because the answer is yes, you can do that, but again, it's about doing that strategically and intelligently and knowing what's the right thing to do, right? So there's capabilities in CloudHealth for read-write access that you can grant it, and then there are features that you can enable for doing things like the automated termination of resources that aren't tagged appropriately, and so on and so forth. So answer is yes.
It's that Jurassic Park meme though with Jeff Goldblum. You scientists spend so much time with thinking, figuring out whether you could, but you didn't consider whether or not you should.
Whether you should.
Whether or not you should. Oh my gosh. Who is the actor?
Say the magic word.
Jeff Goldblum?
Jeff Goldblum, yes. Which my favorite thing in the world is that my 7-year-old son and my 10-year-old daughter, they watch the Jeff Goldblum show on Disney Plus, which I think is hilarious that they think he's fascinating. So anyway, we're clearly veering slightly off topic here. But hey, that's sort of the point, right? A question that came up now around CloudHealth as well is how much does CloudHealth cost, or how do I buy it? It's a great question. So it kind of depends on how you go about it, right? So it's a tool. So you can go to CloudHealth, which is actually a VMware company, and you can purchase it, and it's based upon your spend level. You attach it to your environment, and off it goes, and you pay a portion of your spend. I think it's a totally worthwhile investment because you are very likely going to save far more money than what you're spending on the platform. But like I said, there's other ways to get it as well. So, for example, Mission provides our cost optimization service, and it's based upon our resale program. So if you sign up to our resale program and you purchase your Amazon spend through us at the same price or better that you would get going direct to Amazon, we actually give you CloudHealth for free. So it depends on how you do it. I'm not going to tell you that there's one right approach for you or not. I have seen good reasons for people to buy CloudHealth on their own or to get it through Mission by joining our resale program. Obviously, I think joining our resale program is the best way to go because then you get access to smart people like Jason and Tim, and occasionally you might even get a call from me, although I'm not nearly as smart as these two guys. So that hopefully answers that question. All right, so keep the questions flowing. I think we've answered all the ones that have come in from the audience at this point, but I do have a couple that I think are really interesting. So we've talked about re-architecture a bit, and I think that's really important. And we talked about right sizing and things like that, but there's also purely financial mechanisms to save money. And oftentimes those are misunderstood or confusing. AWS gives a lot of different things to you that you can use to make to save in this way. So savings plans are one example. Enterprise discount program is another example. Private pricing agreements in general, and reserved instances. All of these things are available to AWS customers, and knowing what to use, when, why, how, and being strategic about it can often be difficult. So maybe if we could talk briefly about how we think about those financial mechanisms and how we deploy them.
So I would say I almost always start with looking for low-hanging fruit in a customer's environment. So similar to what I was talking about, started working with a brand new customer a couple days ago, and we were looking in their environment, and we noticed they were spending about $110,000 a month in AWS, and about 15% of that entire spend was all in S3. I'm like, all right, let's have a conversation about that. What do you got in S3? And it turns out they just have these documents that get stored there. They get looked at once, typically in the first 2 weeks, and then they just sit there. But everything was sitting in S3 standard. I'm like, all right, do you guys know your access patterns? Do these documents, get pulled or queried more regularly? Are you not sure? They're like, for the most part, if they're not touched in the first 2 weeks, they're not going to get touched. So I'm like, okay, have you thought about different tiers of storage? And I said, well, what's that? It's just like, really? We're going to have this conversation. All right, let's have a discussion about it. We'll talk about it. So there's different tiers of S3 storage, and that was the first thing we dug into. We talked about whether or not it would make sense to put some manual controls on that and automatically lifecycle stuff over to a lower tier storage like S3 and frequent access, or if we wanted to just let intelligent tiering deal with it. In their case, they knew the access patterns. It was a great opportunity. We said, if you know the access patterns, you're almost always better off going and doing it yourself. You'll save more money. There are other customers that I've worked with, similar situations, that they're like, we just don't know. There's just a ton of data there. We don't know when it's going to be used or how or who's going to access it at what time and whatever. It's like, great, use intelligent tiering for that. Let the robot deal with it for you. So you can put these types of tools in place that will move these objects into lower cost tiers of storage for you. We looked at this with this customer, and within a couple of days, we can already see their storage cost coming down by almost 50%. And that's just with S3. Doesn't cost them anything extra to use it. It doesn't cost them my time to use it. Doesn't cost them my time to even. Doesn't cost them anything to consult with me over it and have a conversation around it. Just a matter of clicking a couple of buttons, and those couple of buttons can save you a ton of money.
I like that, Jason. I like the approach. It's kind of the what can you do right now to show the immediate returns. I also I'm a fan of layering, right? So you take a first thing where you do your low-hanging fruit. And then you say, all right, well, we want to get, maybe we want to do some reservations, but we don't want to necessarily do, be in the business of managing reserved instances, you've got programs like our RIA program. You can do savings plans, so you can have a lot more flexibility into how you use compute. But after you've done that, then all right, well, let's look at something like negotiating EDP, where we say, hey, we're going to be spending money for several years in these platforms and doing, and we intend to grow. So now you layer discount of EDP on top of that. And then, okay, well, we're using this service a lot. We've got, petabytes of data transfer or petabytes of S3 storage. And then you can look at things like private pricing agreements. And each one scales bigger and bigger and bigger. So, a low-hanging fruit, anybody can partake of, right? That's one that's easy for everybody. Savings plans and RIs, if you're getting a little bigger, you're willing to make a commitment, you can do that. EDPs are for larger orgs that want to do a larger commitment. And then on top of that, after that, you get something like a private pricing agreement. But the thing is, all those things will layer one on top of them. You'll get a discount on your private pricing agreement. If you have a savings plan, the EDP is going to knock some money off of that. So as you get bigger, you have more opportunities to layer some of these cost optimization methods on top of things. And if you don't know how to navigate all these waters, that's where you're going to need some help on that, especially if you're a newer company or you're not familiar with some of the latest and greatest things that AWS has for cost optimization. Anything where it can be like, when savings plans first came out about a year ago, almost a year ago, it was a big change from what you see in RIs. One of the things that I think are really exciting opportunities to save money is using the Graviton-based processors for EC2 instances. There's AWS has said that it's right off the top, about a 20% savings. And there was a graph of some work done by Honeycomb's Liz Fong Jones, amazing engineer, who graphed that out, and it showed, yeah, it's legitimate 20% right off the top, just without doing anything else other than switching from an
Not
Intel
only savings too, but
but
it's performance improvements too, right?
yeah, oh yeah, absolute performance improvement. And obviously there are some things you're going to have to adjust to. Not everything is going to compile right away. You might need to do some work on that back end, on the back end for that. But there are a lot of already binaries already compiled for ARM processors. If you're using Amazon Linux too, as your operating system, you have a lot of options there. But I mean, just right at the top, switching over to that is going to cut 20% right off of that.
Yeah.
And then you can layer a savings plan on top of that, and then you can put an EDP on top of that. And really, you're gonna do a little bit of lift at the very beginning, and then you're gonna save a lot of money in the long term.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I actually, we were talking about Liz posted this great tweet showing her kind of work at Honeycomb with deploying Graviton 2 and showing the impacts that it's been having. And it's a pretty amazing thing. We've been talking to the Graviton team about this exact thing. And if you do have workloads where, look, if you're running something like PHP or Python or JavaScript or more dynamic language, interpreted language, or something that has a virtual machine, there's a pretty good chance that you'll be able to just move things over pretty easily in comparison to if you've got a compiled language, maybe you might have more complex problems to solve. But for a huge number of workloads, Graviton's going to represent a big opportunity to save. And again, you get great performance. So that's definitely an interesting one. And I love the layered approach as well, Tim, that you're talking about. It's not, AWS gives you so many different levers that you can push and pull. And there are ways in which AWS is quite opinionated, but I think when it comes to things like price versus performance and commitment, they really just want to give you this incredibly large amount of choice. That's the way they built the platform. It's all up to you. And the hardest part about that is knowing what to choose, right? You've got all of the flexibility in the universe, but what do I choose? When do I choose it? And why do I choose it? And that's really where experts come in, right? Helps you make those decisions.
That's a great point, Jonathan. I think there was one of the first customers I dealt with when I was working at AWS. They were using they had a demo where they were using DynamoDB as a cache, and it was key value store, worked just great. But then I asked them why they weren't using Elasticache. It would cost them a tenth as much. The great Corey Quinn would argue, why not just use Route 53 for it, because it's still just a key value store. But you want
That's
to
just thinking
use the least expensive method for doing the job that is going to scale out with your needs. You can use DynamoDB for a key value store, but should you, right? Do you need to hunt squirrels with a missile? Probably not. So
that's a lot of
what
fun though. I mean, if you have a missile to use, wouldn't you want to?
I gotta say, this sounds like a great show. I would watch, or a great video game. I would play that.
but to that point, missiles cost a lot. So you don't necessarily want to use the biggest and most powerful thing to do a simple job. You want to use the smallest amount that's going to take plus a little bit. And so those are things you want to consider when Jonathan, like you said, talk about using the right thing. That goes a lot into it. What is the right service to use? How much is it going to cost us? What is its flexibility? Are we going to be able to have problems long term? And then if we do grow, what does that path look like to migrate to something else? Data stores are a great example where a lot of orgs will start off just using a relational data store. Hey, we're going to throw stuff in MySQL or Postgres, and now year and a half later, now we have a terabyte of data in this table that we want to do BI against, and we're destroying our RDS cluster by doing analytics against it. And it's like, well, maybe you could just pipe that out to S3 for ridiculously low cost, and then run Athena against these Athena queries against it. Or maybe we want to put it in Aurora, and we only have to run queries once or twice a month, and then you can use Aurora serverless to run things against that. Not have to worry about replication across the various, regions or availability zones. So there are options that you constantly have to review to see what's going to be see what's going to be fitting what your use cases are at that point. And again, that's where it comes in. That's where it's helpful to have someone who knows kind of what the ropes are and kind of what your options are to help you along that path.
And I think, like, with all of those choices, it can sometimes turn into this sort of like paralysis, right? There's too many options. What do I do? And I think, the encouragement I would give to the whole audience is the worst thing you can do is nothing, right? If you have a wealth of options and you're not sure which one you should go with first, that's fine. You can ask experts to help you prioritize, or you can, pick one, right? It's entirely okay to do that. I think a lot of people get overwhelmed by it and they get complacent, and that's when you get yourself into trouble. So, don't hesitate, right? Go for it. Look at the options you have in front of you, and engage with experts like Mission will help you decide and rationalize and know which ones are going to make the most impact, or make a call on your own, and don't sit still, right? That's what's going to burn you. Okay. Another question from the audience has come in, and by the way, keep those coming. Really enjoy the engagement. This question is about CloudHealth again, and how many hours or days is typical to get CloudHealth installed and to start getting reports?
I'll take that one.
You might.
All right, so CloudHealth can be set up in as quick as 24 hours, right? I don't want to sit here and lie to you and tell you it happens overnight. It usually takes a couple days, and it really depends upon whether or not you've had a cost and usage report configured that's compatible with it. So it's going to grab your data from your payer account or multiple payer accounts through a cost and usage report. Some people don't have that CUR set up, and if they don't, you go and create one, and then you've got to wait for AWS to kind of pull in the history. You can pull it up right away, but it's only going to give you information for the current month, and that's useful. But if it's me, I like to look at the big picture first. I'd rather look at, can I get everything? Can I get at least the last year's worth of data, or at least the last 6 months worth of data at a minimum? So you can start to spot trends a heck of a lot easier when you have it. And sometimes AWS support takes a while to do that. I've seen them come through for us in as little as a day and as long as 2 weeks. It really depends on the account, depends on the level of support you have, it depends on what they're doing that day. Those types of requests are not usually prioritized. They're not typically mission critical. So we can get it up and running fairly quickly. The things that you would need to do inside your account, there's IAM roles you're gonna have to provision. You have to deploy them into your account, but it's relatively painless to set up. Once it's configured, you'll get basic information, but you really want to start customizing it, creating personalized perspectives that are useful in your environment to look at specific tags or sort and break down resources in ways that are meaningful to you. That takes a little bit of time to kind of work out what you're looking for, but it's, again, typically start to finish, I'd say most customers are fully up and operational within a week.
Nice, great answer, Jason. And I think one of the key takeaways for me on this, and this is something I tell everybody, if you're in AWS and you do not have the cost and usage reports enabled, stop what you're doing, go into your AWS console, turn that on, right? To me, this is one of those things that, and I've had this conversation with my lovely partner AWS on a repeated basis, it should be on by default as far as I'm concerned. Turn it on. The only way for you to get the detailed, granular information that you need to really decision on what to do in your environment is you gotta have the data, and you're not gonna get it unless you have the cost and usage report enabled. So turn it on. If you need help turning it on, let us know. We can help you with that. It's pretty straightforward, but it certainly does, people get worried about the consequences. It's like, what does it mean? You have to pay for it, but it's very, very inexpensive because you're just storing effectively text files in S3, which is, pennies on the dollar. Do it, turn it on. I think we even have a blog post on our website about this because I was getting so angry that it wasn't on by default. I was like, I'm gonna write a blog post. I'm writing a sternly written letter.
An angry blog
post. Rage blog. Rage blog about it. I was gonna say too, the other thing that I always encourage people to turn on is please turn on billing alerts.
Yes.
That's one of those things. Well, I had no idea that I had spun up an X132XL and by accident, and now I have a $20,000 AWS bill or rise my AWS bill at the end of the month. Please turn on billing alerts, please. You will all feel better.
This just happened to a new customer of ours recently. They had somebody who was, I believe they were out on parental leave, and they came on board with us, and they were like, well, why have our costs gone up so much in the past couple of months? Turns out they had some process, one line of code, which Tim, you and I have seen that happen far too often, but one line of code that was spinning up instances, tearing them down, terminating the instance, and leaving volumes every day. And there were all these EBS volumes, racked up $10,000 worth of charges that we helped them go. We helped them go back to AWS and ask for that in a concession, but it can happen. And if you're not paying attention to it, it can happen very quickly.
This goes back to my assertion that cost optimization is a technological problem. Whereas, if you are not, it's one line of code will make tens of thousands of dollars of difference. Yeah. And you do need observability into these issues to figure out why. Like, is your CPU spiking? Are you scaling for no reason? Especially if you have auto scaling rules based on CPU, and then all of a sudden you realize that your cluster size or your auto scaling group doubled in size overnight. That's going to probably be a technological problem. That's not an issue that RISE is going to save you from. But you have to be diligent. Like security has to be in everyone's job. It has to be at every tier. That your code matters, right? How well it's constructed, how well it's documented. One of our customers that had a $30,000 runaway CloudWatch bill. It took them a significant amount of time to drill down to what was actually causing a line of code because it wasn't well documented. The change they made, they had to go back and find through and pour over line by line by line by line because the change that they made was not well documented in the code. So documents, comments, code reviews, QA, your deployment methods of whether you're going to, what does it look like in pre-prod? What does it look like in staging, right? If you deploy it in staging and your bill goes up, right? What do you think it's going to do in production? So these things, like I know it's the sexy thing to do is to deploy fast and fail fast and continuous integration, continuous deployment into production is all well and good when someone else is paying the bill.
Well said, Tim. Well said. We had another question come in from the audience here. Thanks, Steve, for that one. And he was pointing out that he saw in our demo of CloudHealth that we were talking about compute and storage. Are there capabilities also for data transfer or networking, things like ELBs, CloudFront, and so on? The answer is yes. And I'll let Jason go into that a little bit.
Yeah, there's a ton of it actually. There are cost metrics we can look at around data transfer. We can break it down to what services are using that data transfer. For example, if you see a lot of S3 data transfer out to the internet, depending on where that is and where it's coming from and where it's going to, you can start to determine, does this make sense maybe to put a CDN in front of it? Throw that CDN in front of it, potentially drop your costs. You could potentially get private pricing on that CDN. There are tools out there. You have to dig. You have to know what you're looking for at times. But if the whole point of what I was showing in the initial dashboards are, they show you the high level areas of where you're facing some challenges. And once you know what those high level areas are, that's going to give you direction as to where to go and dig for stuff inside the platform. There's a whole bunch of tools and opportunities available for you. There's metrics around data transfer. There's metrics around storage. There's metrics around load balancers specifically in S3, and trying to think if I'm missing anything in here. There's a whole bunch of stuff there, but data transfer and load balancers are definitely, you can easily find that stuff in the platform.
For sure. And if you have enough, if that's enough volume that it's causing a big issue for you from a cost perspective, it's a really good opportunity to get a private pricing agreement in place. Like this is I think it's something that people just don't think about. They think, well, the price is the price is the price. And that's just not true. Like at the end of the day, if you're pushing a lot of traffic through CloudFront, guess what? You can get a private pricing agreement with AWS and they will give you a huge amount of savings, right?
You think
AWS will be.
You think Netflix plays retail? Yeah, they're
AWS will be the first ones to go to you.
What the big ones are playing.
I'm loving this, watching you guys like at the same time. It's like, let's just keep this going. Ready? 1, 2, no, Tim first. Tim, go.
So I was gonna say, yeah,
thanks, Dad.
There's no, you can ask at any point, and AWS will tell you, yes, you qualify, no, you don't qualify.
Right.
Big companies that have a lot of usage, they're not paying the price on the website. They're not even paying the price you see in EDP. So being the big player, AWS has a lot of flexibility and a lot of leeway in what they can do. So if it's something that we see, we will come to you and say, hey, you might want to look at a private pricing agreement on this. Something that you see that maybe you want to ask if you can do, we can always ask the question and see what AWS will do. There's a commitment, there's going to see growth, but yeah, if you have usage of a service, especially if it's a new service, right? AWS is going to be has been very willing in the past to give private pricing agreements, to throw you credits or other things like that to help you out in adoption or in your growth on a service.
Yeah, AWS has a professed value of customer obsession. And I think that really does play out. I see evidence of it all the time. And I think when you consider costs, it does show up there as well, right? Like they lower costs all the time. They've never raised the price on anything as far as I know. And people often are like, well, it's not in their best interest to get people on private pricing agreements to give them discounts. And that's actually also not true in the philosophy of AWS, especially not in the conversations that we have with them as a partner. Like at the end of the day, a happy customer is a customer that's going to stick around, right? A customer that's making commits to spend on the platform because they like the performance, they like how it's working. That is a valuable sacrifice for them to make from a revenue perspective to ensure the customer is continuing to grow. At the end of the day, it's all about making all of their customers highly successful, and then they're going to grow. And when they grow, their usage goes up, and their rates may go down, but everybody wins, right? So,
yep.
Yeah, I think that's also
exactly what I was going to say too. It's like you look at things, and I think the way to look at it is they value the long-term relationship better than they do short-term, profitability. I think they would much rather have you as a long-term customer, and I think that's one of the values you get out of working with a partner like us, is that as a reseller, we have economies of scale from purchasing that sometimes AWS isn't going to want to talk to you because you may not be spending enough to show up on their radar. But as a partner, we can aggregate all that spend together, and we can work with you to put some of those private pricing agreements together with us that might make more sense for you, and we may be able to help make a difference there.
Yeah. So we have about 5 minutes left before we have to wrap up, and I think the questions have been really great. Keep them coming. If questions come in, I will make sure we answer them before the end. But while we're getting ready to kind of close, I think that is a good topic to just touch on. We've avoided going in too much detail about just mission and mission and mission throughout this whole conversation, but I do think it's important to note that if you're feeling a little overwhelmed by all of what you're hearing, right, there are tons of things to consider. That genuinely is why we exist as a business, right? Is because, you know, AWS as a cloud platform is incredibly powerful. You've got all the choices in the world that you can make. You're given, you know, huge amounts of freedom, and often deciding what to do is the hardest part, right? And that's where we really can help. So don't hesitate to reach out if you do want to have a conversation. We have a program called SA on Demand, which I think is actually one of my favorite things that we do. And it's effectively, if you're interested in sitting down for about an hour with one of our experts, someone kind of like a Tim or a Jason, one of our SAs, they can sit down with you for an hour and it doesn't cost you anything. They'll listen to what your business challenges are, what you're facing in AWS. You know, is it cost, is it performance, scale? Do you have a big project coming up? They'll listen, they'll give you advice. You know, yeah, we might give you a proposal, but ultimately you're getting an hour of great conversation with a very, very smart person who may be able to give you some insight. So if you are a little bit overwhelmed by all the things you're hearing, there is that option. Hit us up on missioncloud.com and we can definitely connect you for an SA on Demand call. So 3 minutes left, no new questions rolling in. I'm gonna give everyone, all of the panelists here, a parting shot. So who wants to go first?
I'm gonna let Tim take the first shot because.
Oh, man. Okay,
Let Tim
so
take the first shot. You might not get up. You know,
it's true.
That's true.
I'm a finisher. So I think if I'm going to say one thing that I think everyone really should do is to talk about cost optimization and security and resilience and availability and observability from the get-go. Right? And if you haven't been doing it, do it now. Stop and do it now. If you're going to look at your architecture, if you can look at your infrastructure, look at it as if you were doing it right now. Don't look at it like you had done it before. Don't worry about the business reasons or whatever, why it is the way it is. Look at it right now, design it right now, and then figure out how you're going to get from where you are now to where it would be if you were going to make it happen right now.
well said. All right, Jason, you got to follow it up now.
A lot more concise. Don't be afraid to ask for help. You know that you're not expected to know everything in doing what you do. Know that there are people out there that do specialize in things, and don't be afraid to engage them and ask for assistance. I think people who are willing to work with other people and ask for that help are the ones that are often the most successful.
I completely agree. I was having this very conversation. My CFO and I were talking yesterday, and I said, people often call me and they say, Jonathan, you're the CTO at an AWS Premier Partner. I have this very specific AWS question for you. And they'll ask me the question. I'll say, you know what? I'm going to go to one of my extremely intelligent team members who knows a lot more about that than I do. And I'm going to put them in front of you and give you an answer to the question. And our CFO said, I totally agree, right? We have people on our teams who are super sharp and capable and who can answer those questions. And it's okay to not know everything about AWS because you're not going to be able to. No single person can. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to engage experts. That's what we're here for.
Tim comes close.
Yes, it's true. That's true. All right, we had one more question, which was not a question. It was just a thank you for a great webinar and information. So thanks, Steve, for that. Appreciate having you here. It's amazing. Good engagement from the audience. We'll do more of these over the coming months, so keep your eye out for that. And if you do have other questions that we didn't get to today or something pops up later, don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to set up a one-on-one conversation, anything you might need. All organizations right now are struggling to really make sure they're not overspending, right? And we're going to be in this world for quite some time longer. So no time like the present, right? Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thanks, Jason and Tim. Good to see you as always. And we'll talk to everyone soon. Thanks.
Take care, guys.
Thanks.